Today I'm joined by Vic Matus, the arts and culture editor of the Washington Free Beacon, co-host of the Getting Hammered podcast. And usually our segment is lighthearted, and usually our segment is fun, but the events of the last 5 days demand that it not be. Vic, first, your reaction to the murder of Charlie.
Well, as you know, Hugh, we're here at the Washington Free Beacon. We have a newsroom that's generally pretty quiet unless something is important and breaking, the president, a press conference or something to that effect. So I'm in my office. I keep my door ajar just to keep an eye on the rest of the newsroom and how everybody's doing. And again, it's usually very quiet. Suddenly I hear the volume from the TV booming. And it was from the news station, and it was reports of something that had just happened, and it just had that tone of something very awful. And the first thing I thought about, of course, was the president, and was reminded of what happened at Butler. So I stopped everything that I was doing, and I looked out, and I was really not expecting Charlie Kirk to be the subject of this terrible thing. Particularly, they start talking about Utah, and I'm immediately thinking, well, I don't think the president and the vice president are in Utah right now, so what's going on over there? And then they said he was hurt. We also had a source who knew somebody, a nurse at the hospital, and they said that he was brought in and that it was grim. And so that's I think we got the sense, and obviously there's awful video out there. I don't recommend people looking at that, but it's clear what happened to him was extremely traumatic and devastating. But we already started to prepare in our minds. As you know, you have to switch over, Hugh, into that sort of we're in the news business. What do we do now, and what are we reporting on, and what do we know, and more importantly, what don't we know? Because there's so many people out there who have to jump in and put in more than the 2 cents. They've got it all figured out, and they've got feelings, and they've got to say this or that, and it's not good. And you have to wait to, hear what we know before you can make any sort of pronouncement. Everyone feels this compulsion, especially in social media, to have to say, here, tell the world, here's what I think is it really matters. And just hold on 1 second. And Lawrence Tribe is a perfect example of this, as you know, the lawyer Lawrence Tribe and law professor, who immediately said, oh, it's case closed. His parents are Republicans. This is a MAGA type who shot and killed Charlie Kirk. And then he had to delete that post. I mean, people are making fools of themselves. And in other cases, they're getting themselves fired.
Vic, I had Justice Barrett on today, and I have the balance of that interview will air, and the transcript will be up. And I asked her about the Brandenburg test. And I try to use terms that the audience would understand. For speech to be prohibited, it must be intended to cause violence and have the imminent potential for doing so. It is almost impossible to regulate speech. And she said, she doesn't do policy, she's a justice, but she commented on the bar is very high for Congress. Do you think Congress ought to try, or ought they to do what the justice, you can read it for yourself, implied, which is the solution lies elsewhere? You cannot regulate this.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's an excellent question that you had for Justice Amy Coney Barrett, by the way, Hugh. The Brandenburg case, which I believe that is in Ohio, and that involved the white supremacist who was charged with incitement, but he wasn't. And of course, this came up obviously in January 6, 2021, for the very same reason. It's a very high bar, what causes incitement. Right now, I don't know about whether or not Congress can be effective in trying to get anything involved in this nature. What bothers me most, Hugh, is people saying that what Charlie Kirk was saying was divisive, and that he was a provocateur, and that what he was saying was causing the incitement. And then, as you know, Matthew Dowd on another network got in trouble, and rightfully so, got terminated for saying that, well, hateful words, will inevitably spark hateful action. So he had it coming, basically. No, that's not how it is at all. I have this terrible fear, Hugh, that what the left's answer to political violence and how to stop political violence is just don't say anything that we might deem offensive, because then you might have it coming. That really, for me, that's what I worry about, because just the absolute glee on the other side about what happened here, and that it was justified, and the rationalizations. It's very macabre.
I had a friend talk to me about this weekend, and I said, why are they insane? And he said, Alinsky. And I said, Really? And he said, yes, Saul Alinsky laid it out, isolate, satirize, freeze, and make what was unthinkable thinkable. I'm compressing 14 rules for radicals into. Do you think that's it? Do you think the left is beyond repair? This is not the Democratic Party that you and I grew up with.
No, but you could also make the case, I guess, that with keeping that in mind, that this has been, a slow burn, that this has been, an ongoing, very slow process. We used to brush this off. I remember back in the 90s and being in college and, insane politically correct professors and all the crazy ideas. And we used to think, well, that's just college. Wait till these kids get out into the real world. Then they'll know what it's really like. And they're not going to have these insane thoughts. But of course, now we feel, again, I've said this before, it's like the inmates running the asylum. All of a sudden, those radical professors have successfully brainwashed radical students who are now in charge in a lot of places. And they've created this atmosphere where this sort of behavior is absolutely acceptable, where they're talking about justifying murder. I mean, there was the president, I believe it's of the Oxford Union, the Debate Society.
He's going to be recalled. He's going to be recalled. But what I want to make sure the audience understands is it's nothing Charlie said at Utah Valley. The killer planned this before Charlie set foot on the campus and had been radicalized. He only did a half semester at Utah State. It wasn't the professors, it's the web.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And I want to point out for your listeners as well, Hugh, Aaron Sabarium of the Washington Free Beacon has a terrific piece up. It's devastating. It's very disturbing about the chat room that the suspect was in and the back and forth where they do talk ahead of time. As early as August, they're talking about September 10 being a very interesting date. They say it there in the chat room. They say, oh, wouldn't it be something if something happened to Charlie Kirk on September 10? And then this was again coming up on September 3rd. So yes, this is something that they've clearly been thinking about. I know people like Politico keep on saying, well, we don't know what the motive is, but I think we're beginning to know what the motive is, Hugh.
Victorino Matus at X, the Washington Free Beacon. You ought to read every day. And when Getting Hammered is back, you ought to listen to that. Thank you, Vic.